Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Extra Shift. I'm Chris, here as always with Brendan. How are we going?
Good. Yeah, it's been a little bit since the start of the season. Now there's a bit to talk about, but surprisingly, like it kind of just went straight into just like business as normal. It's
It's
kind of funny,
been
that isn't it?
like we haven't got to actually record since the season started. I
Yeah.
I started a new job and the hours are stupid.
Mm.
So as a result of that, we haven't got close to actually finding the time to start sort
It's
of
been a
getting
busy
back
year.
into it.
Unfortunately, it hasn't been quite as easy to schedule as usual. But it is episode 215. Welcome, everyone. We're now almost a month into the season. I think like about 3-4 weeks
And
into
it
the season.
feels like it's 9 years.
Yeah,
It's a weird one this year so far. It
it
doesn't
is.
have new season feel. It's it
No,
it just sort of feels like
it feels like we started mid-season.
it does, doesn't it? It feels like we're in about the sort of late January stretch.
It does, yeah.
We haven't got to the deadline. We're not moving players just yet. We are what we are.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of just a bit of what they are. There's nothing groundbreakingly exciting going on.
No, I mean, look,
Unless
we'll get to it, but like at this point, everyone's played at least 10 games. So I think that's like, the minimum yardstick to start really kind of looking at how teams are going. We'll get towards that at the end, but for now, we've got some news and stuff to deal with.
we do. So let's of course start with our usual. So of course 215. So we'll start with number 15s, and I always go for front officers, and Andrew Burnett is right there, and of course Bim Jennings himself is also one of these numbers. So you've got some fine 15s.
Yeah, Maurice Richard apparently for 2 years wore 15. Some
No
reason.
one thinks of Maurice Richard as 15.
No, absolutely
I
not.
don't care if he wore it for 2 years.
It seems to be a number that a lot of people wore briefly, like
Except for Ryan Getzlaff. Like
Brett
that's kind
Hull
of
had
it.
it for 2 years. Ted Lindsay had it for one.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Maurice
again,
Richard,
like
Glenn Sather had it for one.
Getzlaff seems to
Martin
be
St.
the only.
Louis.
Getzlaff stuck with it, but like, yeah, everyone else is a transitional number. I don't quite
Yeah.
know what I know what I'll do. I'll get 15 for a minute. It's just it's a transitional number. It's a number that gets worn by someone while they're waiting for someone to retire. Um, which is quite an indictment on the number 15, is that there's
I
lots
think it's
of.
one of those numbers that you get like in training camp when they don't want to give you like a real number necessarily.
Yeah, I mean Pat the Beak was there as well. Like there's a couple of them, but most of the time Dave Tippett. So there we go. I'm just going down. I'm finding all my staff members. Anyway, let's get to the more important part of it. Martin St. Louis for 2 years in
Yeah, for two,
Calgary.
it's just like a stopover number.
Yeah. just take a brief stop on 15 before you go to a better place. Now, obviously, I've been hitting with the trivia, which Brendan loves because I give him zero context. Now,
Yeah. It's I mean, look, it's challenging. I enjoy it being challenging, but at the same time, I also like it's so often something that I've got no chance of getting.
oh yeah, no, but today I've made it something nice and simple. So,
Oh, good.
215 is the second highest active plus minus in the NHL.
Oh,
Who
okay.
has 215 plus as their number, and who's the player who's above them?
Oh man,
I'm not going to make you pick the number of first.
Oh, that's tricky.
It is
Yeah, look, obviously plus minus is a bullshit stat, and I haven't really looked
100%.
into that. But
100%.
But I think the thing is, like, for me, like my logic in starting to try and work this out is it has to be someone who has been on a pretty good team for a long time, because like garbage teams, you end up with a negative regardless, like because you're on, it's probably not a defenseman because roughly they don't end up with like really great, like, because especially like unless they're playing really sheltered minutes, they tend to kind of end up coming out in the wash a little bit. I don't know. It might be. It would have to be. Shit.
So what I'm going to give you one hint. The top 5 and 5th is tied with 3 players.
Okay.
Everyone in the top 5 has been a captain of their team.
Right. Okay.
And the player at number 2 is not currently a captain of their team, but has been a captain.
Okay. Is it Stamkos?
No.
Hmm.
You got the you're around the team.
Okay.
There's one pipeline that we talk about on this podcast.
Like the current team of Stamkos? Or the
No, not the
previous
current team, the previous team.
Okay.
There's one pipeline we talk about that is captain
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Oh gosh. Who is on is it McDonough?
Yep.
Okay,
Ryan McDonough,
yeah.
former Rangers captain, part of that pipeline of become the captain of the Rangers, get traded.
Is that what people think is good because he has a high plus minus?
I'm assuming so. Ryan McDonough has a 215. The top player active in the league, plus minus, is Brad Marchand.
Oh,
okay. 263.
That makes sense because like there are some ways to like really make the most of this kind of thing. Like if you don't like I think that makes probably a lot of sense because probably Bergeron had a really high plus minus as well before he retired.
Marchand was playing on his
because he was playing exclusively at 5-on-5 with Bergeron. So and that line outchanced people like no tomorrow. And then he was pretty much just playing. He played on the power play and the PK, which don't get counted for plus minus. So
absolute sheltered.
So at all times at 5-on-5, he was playing with in times where it counted plus minus. He was playing with Bergeron. So okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. So the top 5, and again number 5, there are 3 players, but one of them is a captain. So the top 5 are Brad Marchand 263, Ryan McDonough 215, Sid at 202.
Yeah.
Jonathan Toews.
I was thinking about Sid at one point in time, but I'm like, I don't know that it's a high enough.
Jonathan Toews at 179. And then the ones tied on 5 are Andre Palat, 147, Hedman, 147, and the other one who was a captain, Joe Pavelski, 147.
Right, gotcha.
So, but I just thought that one I was happy to do because I'm looking to go, first of all, it's a bullshit stat. But secondly, it's enough of a bullshit stat that you can work it out because you're like,
it's true,
my favorite part of that was when you went, well, it's not likely to be a defenseman.
And
I'm like, and then you went, or a defenseman with really sheltered minutes. And I'm like, you're getting it.
Yeah, because the reality is that, like, you know, even people who historically, people were saying like, oh, you know, Doughty or someone was like really good defensively, whether or not they were or not in total, like they tend to play minutes that mean that they get scored on regardless if they're good. Like it's going to happen. They're playing against top lines. Like
I want to know what Jonathan Toews one was like before the last couple of years in Chicago, because I can't imagine that helped.
Probably not, but I don't know that it was actually as good as people think.
Remember he's an amazing shutdown center, one of the best the game's ever seen. Better than Joe Thornton, ask the NHL.
Okay, so he was positive up until 2017. Which I think is when he got that new contract.
Yeah.
And then it's all downhill from there.
It was basically 2017 was when he got the new deal. So
yeah.
Because if you remember, they all got
it was going down by
because if you remember, they all got their new deals and immediately shut the bed.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like it wasn't even a gradual come down. They just immediately shut the bed.
But Kane was never good defensively, so Kane would have
Kane to be atrocious.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, there are certain players that have never been good defensively.
No, exactly. So let's get into the episode, and we're going to start with Are you checking out what Patrick Kane's plus minus is?
So he's a plus 12 on his career.
a
A lot
plus
of
12.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because it's like, you know, some years it'll be plus 10, other years it'll be negative 10. Like
A
it's
plus 12.
It is what it is.
That's now my favorite NHL stat of all time.
It's better than I thought it was going to be. Honestly, I thought it was going to be negative.
I thought negative. I thought it. Yeah, I thought it'd be something atrocious.
Yeah.
So let's get into the episode, and we'll start with, of course, I have a trade to announce. I think you're going to want to hear it. Well, there's one you do want to hear. Well, I want to hear, but we'll get to that in a minute. Vancouver acquires Eric Brandstrom from Colorado for Tucker Pullman and a 2025 fourth. Tucker Pullman, of course, noted trade
guy in the league. Yeah.
Name.
Noted contract.
Always sounds like a creator player. Like you're in season 15 and you get all those weird ones where they combine really good first names and last names and mix them up. And then you get the random boring ones.
You get Connor Taves and
Connor Taves, yep. And then you get Tucker Pullman because they run out of ideas.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not? I mean,
yeah, look, I don't know what the thing for me, I think, is like Brandstrom at one point in time was a pretty kind of touted prospect. Yeah, he was someone that was like, oh, there's no way that, Ottawa are ever going to trade Eric Brandstrom. And now it kind of feels like he is like one step away from being out of the league.
Yeah, there's been Vancouver's start's been interesting. Colorado's, again, the same. This just feels like
Brandstrom never even played for Colorado.
Yeah,
he never played a game for them.
No, this is the thing. It feels like both teams just decided they needed to do something.
Yeah,
and so they just sort of went. I wonder if Colorado got Brandstrom and then just sort of thought to themselves, we don't actually know what we're going to do with him.
I think maybe they expected him to try to make the team out of camp, and it just didn't really happen.
It's a little bit. It feels a little bit like one we're going to talk about in a minute, where I think that the organization just don't quite know what to do with a player. So the answer is stuff. And moving Brandstrom for Tucker Pullman feels like stuff. It's just we've got to do something. It's very Nelson. It's very Nelson Muntz with, when you nuke the whales, got to nuke something. It's very much the same thing. It's just, why are we trading Brandstrom for Pullman? And because, I woke up, it was Tuesday. Utah acquires Olli Mata from Detroit for a 2025 third. This one was more interesting for me on the back of Utah cleared some space. Everybody got excited, especially people in Toronto who seem to feel that the universe revolves around them, all decided that this was cap space being cleared so Utah could do something with Toronto, at which point they promptly went and got Olli Mata.
Yeah, it's interesting, and they paid assets for him too, which is interesting to me because it feels like a cap dump. Like it feels like Detroit got out of this pretty cheap, considering that it didn't seem like he was kind of working out.
Are the new owners in Utah doing this by playing old NHL games and they see a name?
Yeah, I don't know. And they're like, oh, he won a cup in 2016.
Because Olli Mata's not been relevant. Since
No.
probably 2016, and even then,
he essentially not long after that, he didn't have the foot speed anymore. I think it was injuries.
I don't think he ever really had the foot speed to start with.
No, but like he kind of made smart decisions that made up for it. But he just started to look real slow, and then he kind of bounced around a bunch of teams. And I'm honestly a little surprised. Like he's kept getting deals because he hasn't really been much of a factor in a while. He was really good early on in his career, but it just kind of didn't really last.
It doesn't really feel like that big splash that Utah was talking about there.
No,
we're going to make a big splash, and like I've can I just say we'll probably mention it a little bit later as well when we talk about what's happened at the start of the season. But can I just say I was really over the social media trend of, oh my God, Utah win their first ever game in their first. It's the Arizona Coyotes, you idiots. They've been playing hockey the whole time.
Yeah, I know technically they have new records and everything, but come on.
No, they've been playing hockey the whole time. This wasn't a ragtag bunch
It
of
is
people
90% the
thrown.
same team. It is the
Yeah,
Coyotes with a new
it's the
hat, that's for
same
sure.
coach. It's the same staff. It's
It's not
pretty
even
much
an
the same
interesting hat.
players.
It's not even the
No,
Coyotes with a fancy hat. It's the Coyotes with a no frills
no.
hat
This
that
is the
says like
interesting
we'll
hat behind
design
me.
this later.
This behind me is the interesting hat.
Yeah,
Instead,
yeah.
we've gone with miscellaneous blue and black. It feels like
They
again
have a paper bag that says to be decided on it. Like
it's the NHL creator team where you make that first season and you go, I haven't quite worked out what I want for the design.
yeah,
Boring jersey, I'll fix it in year 2. We'll work it out later.
yeah, yeah.
I'll play with these colors for 12 months. I'll
I
stick to
love
my
how much of the NHL's like whole system for displaying team names and so forth just doesn't deal well with Utah
It
being
can't
called
cope.
Utah Hockey Club, because there'll just be like graphics that'll just say, you know, Senators versus Hockey Club.
I love it was like when Washington became the Washington football team before they went to
Yeah,
Washington Commanders. It was the same thing, but like football team worked really well because like
yeah,
all the recap shows are like, can we just leave this as football team because this is
yeah.
really cool.
It's
Like I like
hilarious.
this. Like
Yeah,
it's very European. It's very like soccer of them. You know the idea of FC. You know it's like
yeah,
the
yeah,
same sort of thing. Now the big trade. Now, the people in Toronto got really excited about the Oli Mata move because, oh my God, we're going to finally get rid of a cap dump. San Jose acquires Timothy Liljegren from Toronto for Matt Benning, a 2026 sixth rounder and a conditional 2025 third. The Toronto pick they're getting it's the earlier of Edmonton or Colorado's third. So much of a muchness, probably close to
yeah.
a fourth. I'm happy with this. Our defense is not great. It was never supposed to be great. We've worked on one side of the puck and sort of getting young talent on the offensive side of the puck. We haven't really massively addressed the back. Like we've got McMadullin coming through, obviously, made another couple of other picks, but realistically, we're still running a lot of the defense last year that was a turnstile.
It is funny that he went for like that Liljegren went from being like a player that couldn't get ice time on a team to being probably like the second best defenseman on San Jose. Like,
Oh yeah, but
yeah,
what I found really funny is the Toronto fallout from the Liljegren stuff, where it's like, never that good. We didn't need him. Don't like him. Never wanted him.
yeah,
He's absolute rubbish. And you're there going, less than 6 months ago, you were all screaming for him to be in the lineup in the playoffs.
yeah.
You were yelling at the top of your lungs about that. I think that like Liljegren's never quite worked with that coaching staff, and then we changed staff, and that didn't work. You didn't move to a staff that was favorable to Liljegren. You moved to Berube. That's not Timothy Liljegren is not a Craig Berube sort of player, right? This is a guy who, even though he's a defenseman, defensively can occasionally have lapses, is quite good at moving the puck out of his own zone, can be good pushing. The Sharks are looking for just some of that at the moment. And if he grows into the defenseman that he could be, and I know that it's like by now go, oh, he's what he is. I don't think it's necessarily the case. Remember, I think he was the player that had mono coming into his draft year. It was where he got sick. And that really sort of, there were scouts saying that going into that draft, if he hadn't have had the mono bout, he probably would have gone really high. I think San Jose is a good spot for a lot of these players at the moment because I think there is opportunity.
Yeah,
and there is
yeah,
a
for sure
chance. There's a chance for this group. And again, we'll talk about the Sharks when we get to the last bit of the podcast. But there's a lot, even though the results aren't necessarily there at the moment, there's a lot to like about what Ryan Wasowski's doing. And I think that a player like Liljegren could thrive really well going forward, depending on what the Sharks decide to do with the rest of that decor. And I think it's probably fire them into the sun. The other part about this, of course, being that Matt Benning going to Toronto is not because they want to use Matt Benning. It's a cap. It's pure cap.
Yeah.
Like, again, the plan, they've got a bunch of players they've got to bring off injured reserve. They can't afford it. So they had to get someone that they could send down or move back up maybe later or possibly jettison.
Yeah, in reality, a lot of the time there needs to be contracts moved around and, bodies and so forth for, to make space in teams.
I mean, Matt Benning Matt Benning was literally going to be body on the Sharks, experienced body. And so I'd rather have Liljegren and see what we can get out of him going forward. I think that's a good deal for San Jose. I know there are people going, "Oh, you gave picks up. That's you got fleeced." The Sharks don't have to worry about that. They've got picks. They're going to get plenty more as we get to the deadline. They've got some veterans there that they're going to fire off at the deadline. So
I don't think they're losing sleep over a third. It's going to be
fine. Somebody is going to give us more than that for Mackenzie Blackwood come the trade deadline. That's all I'm going to say on that. So, do you have before we move on? Have you got any thoughts on Liljegren to Toronto?
No, I think it's a good opportunity. Like in reality, like there's a lot of opportunity for ice time on the Sharks that you're not going to get on a lot of other teams. There's no real stakes. There's a chance to kind of well, if you make mistakes or whatever, it's fine, work it out. Kind of. I think that it's probably the best opportunity for a player who is just wanting to work it out and try to actually kind of earn a better contract.
Exactly. So let's get to the signings. Lafreniere for the Rangers, 7 years at 7.45. That's the Rangers did quite well on that.
Yeah, I think realistically, we'll see. Obviously Lafreniere's kind of started to come on a little bit in the last year or two from like a scoring perspective. Regardless, I think even if he doesn't get significantly better than he has been the last year or so, it'll probably end up being value at the end of it. He's young enough that it's fine.
I think it's a decent deal. Shea Theodore, 7 years at 7.425 in Vegas. That's a good deal.
It's interesting. I really kind of thought with all of the defensemen that Vegas have been adding lately that Theodore might be out the door as a UFA, and then they just go and lock him up, which is interesting.
I think he's too valuable. I think for everything they've brought in, they've never really been able to duplicate what he gives them, and I think they've tried, but I think he's just too reliable.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. But like, in terms of like, they're bringing in Hannafin recently, and kind of having somewhat of a backup. When it either seems to be like him out, or they kind of take it in turns, between like that defensive core, and no one ever plays like a full 80 games. So
yeah, which is one of the reasons why they're good. Is that they just don't ever play a full 80 games at a defensive course, so they're not worn out.
That's probably also true, yeah.
The other part of that to remember is that the 7 years at 7.425, like if you think Vegas are paying year 6 and year 7, you're kidding yourself. Exactly. That's a 7-year deal with an aim on keeping the price down by giving him a 7-year deal. Jake Neighbours, 2 years at 3.75 in St. Louis. Contract.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Jake Neighbours is underrated as a player. Like in terms of, he's probably not a name that a lot of people would necessarily recognize, but he is starting to become sneaky value as a top 6 player. I think if they can continue to get top 6 deployment out of him for the next couple of years, then that's an absolute steal.
100. Look, I think it's a decent contract. I'm not gonna. I can see where he could be going.
Yeah, I will say that the Blues aren't good right now.
So no, they're not. It's a bit the same as the Sharks. So there's a chance.
Yeah, so that helps for sure.
Right, as part of the post-winning a cup victory lap, Florida have pulled out the checkbook and given Carter Verhaeghe 8 years at $7 million. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, look, it feels like they're just kind of running it back with exactly the same group, and it seems like it's working out.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. I mean, I can't really complain with the results they've been getting. I kind of expect them to fall off a little bit, but who would have guessed that Sam Reinhart would be leading the league at this point?
Well, Sam Reinhart's got a scoring machine, and especially given, and we're going to look at some of the JFresh numbers in a bit, but especially given when you look at, for example, Bobrovsky, his numbers are horrible, and they're still winning. So, like, again, we talked about the fact that we thought Bobrovsky was due his fall off, and Yeah, no, that's holding. I'm assuming he's still drunk. But
Probably.
Nick McCabe in Toronto, 5 years at $4.513 million, which is a very Toronto contract.
Yeah.
It feels like Berube goes, Guy, I want Guy for defense. He's strong. He
Look,
goes
he's
stop
fine.
puck.
He's a fine player.
It's a deal. I mean, look,
Yeah.
we sort of we talked a little bit about Toronto before we started. We're going to talk again, obviously, more in depth about how the season started. But Toronto is so boring, and they're not tight defensively boring. They're boring.
Yeah.
There's nothing to them. They are miscellaneous team at this point in time.
Yeah, it's not quite as high flying as it used to be in terms of
No.
but you know, which I'm sure that uncles love, but it's not. Yeah, I don't know. It's not really kind of improved necessarily.
I don't think
Which
it's
is
gotten better, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
yeah.
Now off to goalie corner, and let's run through the contracts, and then we'll talk about what we think of the deals. So Dallas Ottinger, 8 years at 825. Boston Swayman, 8 years at 825. Ottawa Ullmark, 4 years at 825.
Seems
And
going right.
yeah, and well then Joey Decord, poor Joey Decord, 5 years at 5 in Seattle.
Yeah, that's the next tier down, I guess. But
the 825s.
yeah, I think that as soon as one person signed for that, it's just like, well, that's it. That's the slot. That's our comparable, and they're like, all right, fine, you got us. We'll sign that.
That's the going rate. I mean, look, we'll talk about Swayman when we start talking about Boston, because oof. It's what it's starting to be. I finally might have got my they can't do it again. Right.
I know,
they
but look,
look
I've been
bad.
saying it. I've been saying it for years, and it's only when I finally went like you look at their lineup top to bottom and just go, they can't possibly be good, and then they win the President's Trophy, and then you're just like, oh fuck, I don't know. I guess I don't know anything about hockey. Like, eventually, you get it right. It's just it tends to be a season or two late.
Possibly be good. If and if you were looking at these goalies and you were trying to work out, for example, and again, one of the things we're going to look at is the Jay Fresh starting goalie saved above expected per 60. Joey Decord has the best of those stats. He's the best of those goalies. Ottinger ahead just of Joey Decord.
Yeah.
Right. They're the two.
Just of that four, or
yeah. Then there's well, the interesting part is because obviously of how the starts have gone, Antoine Forsberg is counted as the Senators' starter at the moment.
Oh yeah.
It's Antoine Forsberg's numbers. It's got nothing to do with anything else. So interesting, very interesting. In terms of all of those contracts, I feel like the Ottinger one is fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to complain about that. I think he honestly could have asked for more and probably would have had to have given it. I think that's totally fine for Jake Ottinger. At the peak of his career. Swayman and Ullmark, I guess it'll be interesting to see how that kind of turns out for them. Obviously, they had a really great situation in Boston. Whether or not when they were playing as a tandem, whether or not that continues for them over the course of their career is another question.
The Swayman one for me was interesting because we talked about it. Boston cornered themselves and then had to pay to get out of it.
Yeah.
I think they'll regret the paying to get out of it part because I think they put them in a spot. They didn't do the contract while they still had two goalies under contract. And they didn't do the contract while they still had a starter there where they could have realistically gone, well, we'll just keep the other one. They got rid of Ullmark and then went, okay, now let's do the deal.
Yeah. And then I was like, well, now I've got all.
And he's like, well, okay. So are you really prepared? Are you really prepared to go with a goalie whose greatest claim to fame was that he was once the starter for the Columbus Blue Jackets? Are
Yeah.
you prepared to do that?
Yeah.
Right? Are you prepared to go with NHL 19 goalie darling as Eunice Kopsalo? Are you prepared? Because
Yeah.
if you want to ride with that, I'm happy to let you. Yeah, that was just dumb. That was really bad negotiations on behalf of the Boston Bruins. So Sydney, so let's get to some milestones. So Sidney Crosby became the 10th player in the NHL history to record 1,600 career points. He's just behind Joe Sakic for 9th all time.
Yeah, he what was cool about that is it happened in the same game that Malkin became the 48th player in NHL history to score 500 goals, and also the second Russian. So that was kind of a cool kind of milestone game for both of them. Of course, Malkin assisting on Crosby's point, and I think Letang as well, and Crosby assisting on Malkin's. It was a fun kind of thing to have happen. I think that Crosby now is also only about. I think he's only about 6 goals out behind having 600 goals as well too. I think he's pretty close to that.
I thought you were going to say the fun part about that was that the Penguins scored.
Well, that was good too. Yeah, I mean, this was earlier in the season too, before they totally fell off and went under 500. So like things were things were fun at that point in time. They weren't good, but they were fun in that they were outscoring their problems. But yeah, but also that first Russian to score 500 goals, of course, was Alex Ovechkin, who is scoring goals again this season.
Yep.
And he racked up his 700th, he became the 6th player in NHL history to score 700 goals and 700 assists, and he's closing in on Gretzky. He's getting there.
I think my prediction could happen. I mean, will he probably slow down? Yes, but
yeah,
I'm comfortable enough that I say that there is a big chance it could happen, because I think once he gets within sight, like really within sight of it, I think he'll probably just go on a tear. I also think that Washington will do exactly what we expect Washington to do, which is if they get vaguely a sniff that it's on, they're just going to stand in there and just pass him the puck.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we don't care about playoffs. It's all about Ovechkin and the record. It's all about beating Gretzky.
30-something behind now.
Yeah, it was 41 or 42 at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's in the mid-30s now.
So
he could be real close by the end of the season.
I'm still feeling like he might get there. I've just got this hunch.
He very much could. I think he's up to about 7 goals now on the season. So let's check out his rate. But yeah, look, I think it's kind of nice. He had a really slow start to last season, so it's been nice to see him. Well, I mean, the Capitals are scoring pretty well, honestly, which is like a little surprising. So he currently has 7 goals in 11 games. I don't know that he's going to necessarily keep that up, but if he did, it would be a 52 goal pace. So if he continues at this rate, he will break the record this season. I don't know that, like in the past, he has absolutely done that. But he hasn't scored 52 goals since 2015. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen, but we'll see.
I'm calling it right now. Anyway, so let's go through and let's talk about any surprises or anything. I'm sort of, what I think we might do is we might take a very quick trip around, and if you want to talk about the divisions, I'm going to start with the Metro. Obviously the big news out of the Metro is that Matvei Michkov is for real and the Flyers are thrilled. They're absolutely rock bottom and they're not good. But Matvei Michkov, and it's like, he's fine. He's fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, he would
John Tortorella hasn't killed him.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the big story there is that John Tortorella is giving him a lot of leash. He came into the season with Tortorella saying, good things about basically like, we know that he's going to make mistakes and I'm not going to be too harsh on him about it. I'm going to give him some rope and let him do it. He started to say recently a little bit more about like, look, he knows that he's, but it's not, he's certainly not being crucified by Tortorella, which is a big step in the right direction.
You wouldn't expect that. In terms of the rest of the Metro, like you could have copy pasted large swathes of it. Like the Islanders, I had this thing of, they were a bit injured defensively. They're usually stout. they might surprise you. No, my instinct of Lou Lamoriello doesn't know how to build a team anymore seems really accurate, and
Yeah.
they're not good. They're not good.
No. I mean,
and
I'm not shocked about the Islanders. That's for sure.
no, look, as I said, a lot of what I sort of said about the Islanders preseason was about this idea of, look, defensively they normally sort it out, and maybe they can work something out offense. No, they can't work anything out offensively. They've done a really bad job of building that offense. They're not a good team. They're not very good at scoring goals. Their goals for, I think, is it the lowest in the league? It might be the second lowest.
I wouldn't be surprised. That sounds
I'm just
about
checking.
right.
It's the only team that has scored less goals this season than the Islanders. Let me just confirm that. Yep, are the Ducks.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it the Ducks?
The Ducks are the only team that has scored less goals than the Islanders, and it's not by much.
Yeah.
The Islanders and the Ducks are both sitting under 30 goals scored.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, the Islanders have 28, the Ducks have 24. So they're not very good. Apart from that, Igor Shesterkin's very good at goalie. Who knew?
Yeah. I mean, look, that's it's pretty much lining up with my prediction for that. Like my big, I think that in the Metro at the moment, like my big surprises are like Washington have been on a bit of a heater. I don't know necessarily how long that will like how much of this is an illusion, because last year they were racking up points, but they were doing it in a weird way where it didn't look sustainable. Like they've actually kind of looked a little fun this year. I don't know how realistic that is. I don't know if this is actually real or if they will tail off. I kind of expect that they will probably tail off sooner or later.
Tom Wilson's playing hockey and not trying to kill people.
Yeah, it's kind of, look, it's obviously
I'm not
only
used
been
to
11
this reality.
games. Yeah, it's obviously only been 11 games and they've won 8 of them. Whether or not that will last is a big question. I kind of expect them to tail off a little bit, but apart from that, obviously Carolina and New York, being at the top of the ladder, that makes total sense. The Devils haven't been bad. Columbus obviously haven't been particularly good. That's not all a shock. The big kind of disappointment, like for me, is that like the Penguins find new ways to be bad every year, and it's always a different one. I don't know, like last year the big problem was like depth. Like they had nothing from their bottom six. Like if the Stars weren't doing it, nobody was. This year especially, they started really strong with their bottom six. Like they actually had like really good scoring from all the way up and down the lineup. They just could not for the life of them keep the puck out of the net. They just, as an entire team, looked like an absolute fucking peewee team out there trying to defend against people. And I don't know like what necessarily changed apart from them just being like another step slower. I think that realistically they're trying to play a defensive system that just does not work for the personnel that they have. A big part of it as well has also, of course, been Tristan Jarry forgetting how to be a goalie and having to be sent to the AHL. That obviously doesn't help either, but they've gotten good, like, respectable goaltending out of their other two goalies, that it hasn't been the major factor of anything. Like certainly the team overall haven't been helping out the goalies in any capacity. They, find a way to like score a couple of goals and then just cannot stop the other team from scoring to like for the life of them. And as much as I want to say, like I've been saying for a couple of years, that maybe it's time that they move on from Mike Sullivan and get another coach in. I don't know that this isn't unfixable. Like I don't know that he couldn't just implement a different defensive system and be fine. The last couple of games, they've been playing much more like defensively minded and they've etched out a couple of wins. They've been against bad teams. So obviously it is still only, 10% of the way into the season, a little bit more.
Yes.
So it could change dramatically over the, the course of the season. They could find a way to fix this and be fine, because overall, like a lot of other things look good about them. Like their power play is working, their depth is working, which are the two major problems last year that sunk them. If they can just find a way to play decent defensively, not even good, just respectably decent defensively, then they're back to being like a bubble team, which is kind of where I picked them to be.
See, for me, like again, I don't know. I feel like the Penguins will just sort of bobble around that middle. I think they'll pick it up a bit. For me,
Yeah.
the bigger disappointment has actually been the Devils. If you look at the Devils,
Mm.
the big problem for the Devils is, first of all, they've played 3 more games than almost everybody else in that division.
Yeah, I mean, look, I expected them to be better than
Secondly,
they have been, for sure.
secondly, the biggest problem I think for the Devils is the goaltending is atrocious. Right, their
Yeah.
goaltending. Now, I was going through looking at the stats on the goalies, and their goaltending. So if you go through and look at Markstrom is a 260 has a 262 goals against, but Jake Allen in 4 games has 325 against. He's an 876. That's bad. Like Jake Allen's
Yeah.
Jake Allen's an 876. Markstrom is apparently a 907, but he's not really keeping pace with the other goalies around him. And you can't just run him. And the only goalies that are behind Jake Allen are basically the 2 Sharks goalies, because you'd expect that. A couple of, sort of rookie / young starters, and Stuart Skinner. And if you're being compared to Stuart Skinner, that's not good.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that we thought that the Devils had kind of fixed their goalie problem,
No.
and it doesn't seem at this
the
point
problem,
in time.
if you remember if you remember
yet.
the problem with the Devils were in the Askarov sweepstakes, and they were trying to sign Askarov as their goalie of the future, and that was where they were actually putting the plan in. The idea was they'd get Askarov, and that'd fix up their goaltending. And by the way, Askarov has been really good on the Barracuda. Really good on the Barracuda. The Barracuda are playing really well. They're fun. To move up now to the Atlantic. First of all, the Bruins don't look great. We talked about that before. They just don't. But the problem is that the Atlantic looks absolutely no different than it normally looks. Apart from where the Bruins are. The Bruins are the outlier.
Yeah.
You could copy and paste. I was about copy and paste the middle of the Metro. The Atlantic, you could literally have written it down before the season started. Yeah. And with the exception of Boston, maybe, the rest of it, the Habs are really not good. Sam Montembeault, the first game of the season, gave me an amazing save percentage in fantasy. And since then, he has cost me 2 weeks. Because he's just, the minuses are massively bad. And that there was a whole, I think it was an Eric Engels article the other day, basically saying they're trotting out the same excuses. There's no step forward again. At some point.
I think we're looking at like 4 teams with that same story. Like Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, and Montreal are all teams that every offseason we hear this is it. They've they're going to be good now. They're ready to turn it up. They've got young players or whatever who are ready to turn up, and they're gonna it's all going to be different now, and they're going to be pushing for a playoff position this year. And then it's the same 4 fucking teams at the bottom of the bottom of the Atlantic again.
Yep. And in terms of the top, we did say that we both said we thought Tampa would be much better, and they have been.
Yeah.
But the one I really want to get onto, because let's face it, it's the one that'll get the most engagement when we talk about this, is the fact that the Toronto Maple Leafs might be the most boring team in the Eastern Conference. They could possibly be the most boring team in the NHL. They are not fun to watch.
Yeah,
they are really, and they're not defensively amazing. All these people talking about Berube was going to make them the Great Wall and all this. They are not defensively good. They do stuff. It's okay. Occasionally, Austin Matthews goes, "Oh, that's right," scores, and they win a game. And then they go out and they lay an egg, and then they win. It's almost like they're the Toronto Maple Leafs, and all you did by getting rid of the coach was took away the bit of excitement that goes along with that. And what's being built in its place it's boring. It's so boring.
It's kind of just like tapered off to being not that interesting.
No, and I'm actually kind of for it, because the more it tapers off to not be interesting, the less we have to talk about them. Right, the Pacific. I'm going to do the Central last, because the Pacific, Everyone expects me to do the Pacific last, and we're
Yeah.
always last. Damn it! So no, we're not.
Yeah.
No,
That's
we're
it.
not. Now, the thing that's impressed me the most is that we might have the least amount of points in the NHL right now, but my God, the San Jose Sharks are fun. They are so much fun. If
Yeah.
Celebrini was playing more or wasn't injured, we would have more than that points wise. Obviously, gets a goal in his first game with an absolute heater. It was an absolute heater. He didn't bank it off a defenseman and put it in off the defenseman. That didn't happen. It was a heater and it was a tracer bullet. No, actually, seriously, if you want tracer bullet, go and watch Will Smith the other day. Like, the reason I've got there's only one Will Smith, his release on the puck was insane. And Will Smith has been a massive positive for me this season so far.
I like that. Like he's like having trouble scoring for a little bit, and then just scores 2 in one game.
Yeah, he's just like it's not coming. It's getting close, but it's not coming. Getting close, but it's not coming.
And then the jam breaks. And
I never thought I would say the sentence. I love having Tyler Toffoli on my team, but I really like having Tyler Toffoli on my team. He's so much fun. Like, he is a fun player to have on your team, and he's so good with the youngsters. Look, we're not great. We weren't expecting to be great.
No.
Our goalies have been getting abs. Like, Mackenzie Blackwood has the second worst save percentage in the NHL currently. Vitek Vanacek has the worst save percentage in the NHL. Vanacek's numbers are really bad because he hasn't faced as many shots. Mackenzie Blackwood has faced the second most shots in the NHL. Third most shots in the NHL. And, like, he's got a defense of kids and pensioners.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, I think what's fun is that they've been able to like outscore a lot of their problems.
Oh,
like they're like, oh, we'll let in 5 goals. That's all right. We'll just score 5 goals.
And what I liked the other day was when they were up 2-0 against Vancouver and then lost 3-2. Ryan Wasowski, rather than do the whole, oh, we're a young group, we're learning, and blah 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 blah. I got to the press conference and goes, no one pissed off. That was embarrassing, and you don't do that crap. Like, they're going to learn really fast. You can't give that lead away. You've got to finish that game out. And when they won their first game, his speech to the locker room was literally just looked at them all and went, fuck, it feels fun to win. Let's do more of that. Yeah. And then they won the next night, and they were like, this is getting to be a habit. Like, I'm just enjoying the Sharks this year. I've got zero expectations. We expect to be rock bottom. We expect to have a chance at another lottery pick. I did say that I think they might still come decently good and pass a few teams, and they're not that far back, and the Ducks are not that good. So it wouldn't surprise me if San Jose kind of ruin it and go past the Ducks, maybe the Kraken or the Flames, one or the other. And I mean, if Stuart Skinner keeps being Stuart Skinner, who knows? Speaking of Stuart Skinner, let's talk about the Oilers.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the elephant in the room is that Connor McDavid is injured and out for 2 to 3 weeks, but that's recent. Like, that's only happened in the last few games,
and they won. They
weren't winning before, you know.
My prediction about the Oilers being really bad this year is that Stuart Skinner is not the answer, and what we found from the start of this season is Stuart Skinner is not the answer. Like, they kind of knew that. And then I think they talked themselves into, no, he's definitely the answer. He's not the answer. Like, Stuart Skinner is not going to get that team over the line. And I think they've got bigger problems, but I think that the players they lost, which everyone went, it won't hurt them that much. I think it's hurting a little bit.
Look, to be fair, they did this last year. They started off bad.
But they can't sack another coach.
No, but like eventually at some point in time, they got to like the last 40 games of the season, and McDavid and Draisaitl just put the whole team on their back and outscored their problems.
Well,
it's probably going to happen again.
I mean, they probably will, but the reason they did that was, one, McDavid got healthy. And two, they sacked the coach and brought in, his junior coach. Again, is his Pee-wee coach getting ready? We're running out of people.
We'll just keep stepping it down. Yeah, no, look, we'll see. I mean, there's certainly no guarantees. probably at one point in time the wheels had to come off. What they were doing, whether or not they can be good enough in this division is a question still to be answered once McDavid gets healthy again.
I think their biggest, and we talked about it before, I think their biggest help is that large swathes of this division are teams.
Yeah.
Like the Canucks are kind of a team at the moment. Like the Flames.
Yeah, I mean, Elias Pettersson's had a terrible start to the season. He's been pretty, abysmal so far. He could pick it up and they could get going again, or it could be, they could start to slide.
The Canucks and the Flames have the same amount of points. To one of them, it feels like a massive positive.
Yeah,
to the other, it feels like a big disappointment. And Vegas, meanwhile, are just Vegas. And again, my preseason prediction was that Vegas would just steamroll everything.
Yeah, I mean, big story for Vegas is Mark Stone is fucking incredible right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's almost like all that time I've helped.
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't want to jinx him, but it's always the question. Mark Stone is always incredible when he's healthy. He hasn't been healthy for some time. Will he remain healthy the rest of the year? I hope so. I certainly hope so, because it's nice to see this resurgence. I'm kicking myself that I could have picked him up in every fantasy draft that I had, and I went, no, he's going to play 20 games and and be out for the whole season. And so far, that seems like that would have been worth it.
What I find really fun at the moment with the Pacific is that, again, for all the Oilers are the hot scoring team, they're the hot scoring team. They've scored 31 goals. The Golden Knights have scored 54.
Yeah,
it's just been, and it's not been this defensive clinic. They've been an offensive juggernaut so far. Apart from that, the Kings are decent. They're looking fine, and they might vaguely take that step we've talked about. The Central, now I can hear the Jets fans winding up. I can also hear the Preds fans going, why did you have to say we were going to be fantastic? Do we want to start with the Jets being amazing or the Preds being?
No, I think let's start
terrible?
with the Preds. Let's start with the bottom of the roster, because like the Preds, I think, like I'm not totally shocked that they had a slow start, given like how much kind of roster overhaul they've had. They've brought in, they brought in like a whole bunch of new guys, which
for everyone talking about Utah being a brand new club and all this amazing, they should have just done that for the Preds, because like
Nashville probably has more new players than Utah does.
They were meeting each other on the ice.
I mean, in terms of like essentially half of their top six is new players. They had some reasonable turnover, but it's they're starting to, those players are starting to get going, and it isn't the entire reason. They've also they probably shouldn't have been as good as they were last year. They kind of just they were kind of running off magic in last year, in terms of they outperformed what you would think that their roster should be able to do, given that there were a bunch of just random dudes on their lineup. So maybe this is a long time coming, and and they'll have to fight their way out of it. I'm not too sure, but I don't know. Look, I expect them to kind of return to being more mid of the pack in the coming games.
The Avs have also been deeply disappointing to start the season.
Yeah, they also have been deeply injured.
They really are.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem that the Avs have got is that I don't think the Avs know what their starting lineup's vaguely going to look like night upon night.
No. The vast majority of their forwards are out. I think that something like 4 out of 6 of their top 6 is out, which is that's hard for anyone to come back from.
And more importantly for the Central, we all predicted the Wild and the Jets to be running away at the top, and
of course,
and especially we predicted the Jets to be an offensive powerhouse who've scored 59 goals, and in their last 10 and 9.
They almost won 10 in a row. It's nuts. I don't get it. I don't fully understand it. I'm still waiting for
they're getting their look. They're getting their Hellebuck play.
Yeah,
they're getting good Hellebuck play at the moment. We've said the Jets will be what they will be until Connor Hellebuck snaps.
But they're also
And
scoring. Like you talked about Vegas scoring 54 goals. Winnipeg have scored 59.
yeah,
Like,
again, Winnipeg have been able to put the puck in the net a lot. They've done very
yeah,
well at that.
a big part of that is probably some really unsustainable scoring from, third line, Niederreiter
Yeah.
and, guys like that. Nikolai Ehlers finally kind of, turning up in a huge way, despite still not being given the deployment that he deserves. Like I think that there's probably some unsustainable things that are going to happen there, but they're building themselves a bit of a lead. That's for sure.
It's like when you look at the stat leaders at the moment in the league, what I find funny. I mean, Kyle Connor has 9 goals at the moment, which is helping.
Yeah.
What I find really funny in the league at the moment is that the points leader is obviously Sam Reinhart, but he's tied with 2 other players, Kaprizov,
Yeah.
who's been amazing for Minnesota, not a shock.
Yeah.
But Kyle McCarr, and this is the thing, Colorado have been terrible.
Yeah.
But Kyle McCarr has 21 points and Nathan McKinnon has 20.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That goes to show
I think
you
no one else on their entire roster is doing anything, I think.
And that goes to show you as well, you should probably have a goalie. Because Georgiev, that's been bad. Goal scoring at the moment in the league, we've got 4 players tied on 10. Sam Reinhart, Kucherov, Nico Hischier, and Cole Caulfield. Of course, because, look, Cole Caulfield was a player that when we got to the start of the fantasy season this year, I refused point blank to let him go anywhere because I'm like, he gets all of Montreal's points.
Yeah.
And he's been getting all of Montreal's points. Despite the fact that if you ask everybody, they've got the best defenseman in the league now. Just ask them, they'll tell you. They will tell you this is the greatest defenseman going around.
Big question I have, like looking at some of these stats, is how bad and how few points would Anaheim have if it wasn't for Lucas Stahl?
That is the most surprising, because I think part of the thing you put down in the document was any big surprises.
Yeah.
Stahl is the surprise.
Yeah, I mean, he's been really like Vesna caliber, and they're still almost like 31st out of 32 teams in the league.
Yeah, he's been incredible. He's been unreal. 937 for anyone who doesn't know. The only goalie with a better save percentage at the moment is Freddie Anderson, Carolina. And think about the differences in the defensive cores between Carolina and Anaheim for a minute. That's a big difference,
Yeah.
So I think, and by the way, good old Cam Talbot.
Yeah.
Like Cam Talbot in Detroit,
hanging in there.
923. Go Cam Talbot. Like it's nice to see. He just won't go away. He's always there. He hangs around. So some of the questions before we finish up, we did ask for some questions. So Christina in the group asked, in 2023, there was talk the NHL games might come back to Australia in 2025. Have you heard anything more about that? No. The league will let us know when they feel like it, if they're going to do it again. I feel like they will, but probably not until 2026 if I had to put a bet on it.
Yeah, I would think that we would be starting to hear about it, pretty soon if it was going to be like the start of next. It's definitely not going to be this season. Like we would have heard about it by now if it was going to be this season. But if it's going to be next, you're probably going to start to hear about it, in the coming months. I don't know. I'm interested. Like it sounds like everything was, really positive from the previous one. We heard a lot of kind of really, kind of positive things said about like, oh yeah, this is good, this is great, whatever. Obviously it was a preseason game, and a lot of the other international series stuff we've seen have been like real in-season games, and that, has its own kind of, baggage as well. I don't know how much of it factors in that one of the teams that we had in Australia no longer exists. I don't know if
I know that Leah and Merrill and all the people who came out to follow that loved it and loved the time out here. And the players really liked it. They hated the flight, but they liked everything else about it.
Yeah.
But I think 2026 is your best bet. And I said that's optimistic. It could even be. I think what they sort of indicated was they've got some other markets they want to rotate. I think they'll probably rotate a couple of others first, and then they'll come back. So I think
That's probably true. Like, I mean, there's a lot of places in the world that you can that you can have.
to be blunt and not to denigrate Australia in any way, shape, or form, there are bigger markets that they can break into.
Absolutely, there are many bigger markets.
There are much bigger markets they can get games going in, and they probably will. Ryan asks, are the Sharks contenders with the streak they're on? This was just before they lost to the... You better believe it, buddy. We're going all the way. We're going all the way. Stanley Cup 2029. Look out. Look out. The Celebrini Cup. The Celebrini celebration will be on.
Gregory Savoy asked, with their slow start, any changes coming in Pittsburgh? I think I addressed this partially, but I think the thing for me is like, I also don't really think so, because the as much as like they've been in dire straits over the last few years, management have shown very little interest in like any kind of rumblings about moving on from the coach, or any kind of, major changes in any particular way. I would hope that there'll be some strategic changes, but I don't think that we're going to see any personnel changes. It would have to get dire, I think, mid-season for them to finally, make a coaching change or something. And I think that's going to be the first major thing that happens. But they don't seem to be excited about doing it, which I get. There is no better coach out there. But at the same time, I do suspect, and have for some time, that maybe... look, coaches reach the end of their kind of effectiveness on teams, regardless of how good they are. I suspect that Sullivan probably did that a couple of years ago, and I don't fully understand why they haven't decided to just try something else. But it is a mixed bag. You don't always get an improvement.
No, exactly. I think there might be some change. I mean, look, it wouldn't shock me if they got rid of Sullivan. It also wouldn't shock me if you saw Dubas dip into the market first and see what he could get in terms of... I think he might be still, and look, this is a theme that's been on Kyle Dubas's plate for years. I think Dubas still might be trying to go out there and sink himself a goalie. But this has been something that
they've
Dubas
got pretty good goaltending out of the two back. Like, I think the real question is they would need to try and get rid of Jari.
Yeah, I think that's the question.
I think that's going to be the difficult thing, realistically. Like, I think that they're actually relatively comfortable with running Adelkovic and Blomqvist. They've been pretty good for them. The big problem is that they have that money tied up in interest in Jari, and that's probably not easily movable.
No, I think that's probably a problem. And Tim asks, not a Detroit question, which is amazing. Can the Panthers and the Jets keep rolling? It seems no after cup issues so far, and the Jets surely not. And we talked about that before, but let's just sort of... I think we'll wrap it up.
I would say, like, rolling in terms of like being a good team, yes, for the Panthers. I don't know if they're going to be as good as they're... they are currently. I think that there probably will be some regression to the mean a little bit. The Jets, I just don't fucking know. I can't imagine so.
I've said the whole way along.
I think that the Jets will cool off.
I don't believe in the Jets, because the Jets usually give you a reason to not believe in them. And it might be different this time. It may very well be different this time. But
it could be. I mean, like, the interesting thing about the Jets too is that a lot of those players who we talked about just before as being on heaters are also in contract years. They're all pending UFAs. Could this be a real kind of like catching lightning in a bottle thing for a bunch of those players, and then all of a sudden they all leave in free agency? It could be. But I don't know if they're going to be this. They're not going to be win 10 out of 11 games good, and that shouldn't be for the rest of the season. And that shouldn't be a conspiracy. They shouldn't be like controversial to say. No team realistically in the NHL is that good.
No, that's the thing. Everyone will regress a little bit towards the mean. It's how far they come back, and
no one wins 9 out of 10 for the entire season.
No, unless it was Boston the other year. But look what happened in the playoffs. So that'll do us for tonight. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. Thank you everyone for sort of following along. We will be back more regularly. Don't panic. We're now sort of getting back into a groove, and we'll be back into a bit more of a schedule coming up. So we will be back more regularly. Thank you everyone for watching and following, and we will catch you all later.
See ya.